Let me read to you a passage from the 11th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 37 to 41. It's the Gospel for Tuesday of the 28th week in Ordinary Time, Year 2. St. Luke writes, "When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee, noticing that Jesus did not first wash before the meal, was surprised. Then the Lord said to him, 'Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you.'" That's from Luke chapter 11, verses 37 to 41. And what does it suggest to us? Well, let us begin by noticing the circumstances of our Lord's words in today's Gospel passage. Our Lord had been speaking to growing crowds, in verse 29 speaks of the crowds, and the chapter gives his extensive teaching. We read that he had just finished speaking, and a Pharisee invited him to dine at his home. Inasmuch as the Pharisees were among our Lord's leading opponents, this detail is very revealing. It shows that our Lord's entire manner in the face of this opposition was such as not in any way to inhibit a Pharisee from even inviting him to his home. So our Lord's kindness was manifest. When the Pharisee invited our Lord to his home to dine, our Lord accepted the invitation immediately. He wished to save all, including the Pharisees. At the same time, once in the house of the Pharisee, he did not hesitate to correct him when the occasion called for it, which it soon did. Indeed, by the time our Lord had reclined at table, the Pharisee was already surprised at him, for our Lord had failed, and I quote, to wash before the meal. This washing was ostentatious and excessive, being seen as a religious obligation. It was a tradition that in no way was imposed by the law of God, and our Lord, of course, simply disregarded it. Perhaps by his manner, the Pharisee made it obvious, not only to Jesus, but to others, that he was surprised at Jesus. Immediately seeing the response of the Pharisee to his disregard of such practices, our Lord proceeded to correct the Pharisee. I prefer to imagine our Lord speaking with a smile on his face. I imagine him smiling, gazing at the Pharisee, and perhaps shaking his head at his guest, as it were, as he told him that he and his class were foolish. "You foolish people," we read our Lord saying in the passage. "You fiddle about with rules such as this while missing the important things." He spoke firmly yet kindly, and perhaps with an air that showed how ridiculous the attitude of the Pharisee was. I imagine this particular Pharisee not to have been malicious. He did invite our Lord to his home, but he was blind and foolish and could not see past the rules insisted on by his own set, by his own class. And there are other details later in the scene that are not included in our reading today. Other Pharisees and lawyers are present also, and so it is clear that our Lord is addressing them too. Our Lord's forthright words, we are told, occasioned fierce resentment on the part of the scribes and Pharisees, which, after he had left the house, showed itself in their attacks and efforts to catch him out. Let the entire scene then symbolize what we must avoid. We are called to be disciples of Christ, listening to his word and putting it into practice. Well then, let us consider briefly his word as it is given to us in this short passage. As an aside, may I observe that some texts of the Gospels appear to summarize a more extended flow of thought, and the summary can involve a certain obscurity in what the situation may have been and may have contained an obvious meaning. In our Gospel passage today, our Lord says, and I quote, "Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? Give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." So our Lord says in that rendering, give what is inside to the dish, inside the dish to the poor. Well, a slightly different rendering, as in the Jerusalem Bible, is give alms for what you have, and then indeed everything will be clean for you. In any case, two things are immediately apparent. Our Lord is saying that the Pharisees are almost wholly bent on a religion which looks to externals and forgets the religion of the heart. They fuss about with external cleanliness, while inside the dish being themselves, all is unclean. But then our Lord, as shown in the first rendering of our text, the one I read at the beginning, speaks of the interior of the dish as also being an image of what could be given to the poor. That is to say, their heart and the religion that they practice lacks all concern for the poor. They are interiorly unclean in that they are greedy and lacking in concern for those in need. If only they would draw from inside their dish, which is to say their own inner selves and all that they actually own, and give alms to the poor, they would be clean within. They would then be truly clean. Let us take our stand with Jesus and look to him constantly as our teacher and redeemer. He tells us to shape our hearts according to his own. Our religion involves a transformation of the heart, and that will include a profound concern for the poor. Our heart and our life ought to be like the dish that contains good things, and from it we ought help those in need. In this, Christ is our model. He who was rich, as St. Paul says, became poor for our sakes, so that we might be rich. So let us follow him closely, making him our model for our entire life, both interior and exterior.